It's been 10 years since the start of the civil war in Syria. It all began in March of 2011 when pro-democracy protesters rose up against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. They were seeking government reforms inspired by the social media-fueled Arab Spring that swept through neighboring countries. But over the last decade, the conflict has left more than 500,000 people dead and millions more displaced and struggling to survive.
And the winner is FreeCom.
And that brings us to FreeCom, a technology created by a Syrian immigrant living in Germany, Abdul Rahman al-Ashraf. His experience in Syria during the civil war inspired him to create a solution for people in conflict zones to communicate easily, even when internet networks are down. His invention won the 2016 European Youth Award. Here he is reflecting on the past decade.
Most of the great ideas, they came to people's minds after struggling and suffering for too long. Even in the worst cases like the war, if the person thinks positively, he can change things for better and he can rescue his life and other people's lives.
What was it like when the crisis first started happening?
Actually hearing about the problem and seeing it, it's completely different from living the problem. You could really literally walk in the street and then a rocket fall on you. You go to job, you go to university, and you have to continue your life normally, and you don't know if you are coming back home or not. One of the hardest feelings it was in 2014 when one of my very close relatives, the area where they live, they got bombed, and we tried to reach it out, but actually it has no telephone connection, no internet connection, and you don't know anything about the people, what's going on there. After I was moving to Germany, I had an opportunity to work on research to create an app that could communicate with other phones without any kind of connection. FreeCom simply just create alternative network for people to communicate and use. For example, if a disaster, if a bombing happened, instead of going back to the internet, the mobile itself, it will search for the phones around it and build a local network so everybody can text and reach other people's out. My whole family is actually still live in Syria. Leaving everything behind, it was very hard, especially in the beginning. You feel somehow guilt that you are chosen among so many other people who are trying to maybe have a better life, and you are one of the very few people who made it.
It has been 10 years since the conflict first started in Syria. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, actually, the first thing is like 10 years is actually not only a number. We can imagine a kid born 10 years ago, and now he or she is 10 years old and know nothing but suffer and conflict, and being in some place where electricity barely comes and water is very hard to get. Somehow our modern life system allowed us to see a lot through media and internet, but also isolated us emotionally from each other. For the future, I would love to be in a place where I can create more innovations which help the people to be having better life and having investments in people, not from people.
FreeCom is available for anyone. It's free. Abdul Rahman made the open source code available on freecom-info.com.